The ancient account was coming due. Commander Elias Vance stood on the command deck of the survey corvette Pathfinder, a place that felt more like a library than a warship's heart. Screens glowed with the soft amber of analytical scripts, not the harsh red of tactical overlays. Before them, the obsidian anchorage sprawled across the void, a system-spanning graveyard of some forgotten forerunner race. It was a ruin of shattered ring worlds and dead Dyson swarm collectors, a silent testament to ambition that had outstripped its foundation. Vance was a scholar in a uniform tasked with cataloging ghosts and filing reports on their cosmic tombs. But this ghost was different. This one was humming. For 3 cycles, the Pathfinder's deep-range sensors had been tracing a signal that defied physics. It was not a broadcast, not a beacon, not any known form of communication. It was a resonance, a whisper that vibrated in the fabric of space-time itself, focused on a single, impossibly dense point within the anchorage's densest debris field. On the main holographic display, the signal's origin was marked by a shimmering, complex sigil, a geometric form that seemed to fold into and out of reality. It looked less like a warning and more like a mathematical proof. The ship's archivist AI Nomad had labeled it an anomaly of unprecedented structure. Vance felt a familiar tension coil in his gut. The anchorage was supposed to be dead, a source of salvage for sanctioned academic missions, and more often a tempting prize for pirates and illegal scrappers. His mission was simple: observe, record, and report any unsanctioned activity. He was not here to awaken sleeping gods or answer calls from beyond the veil of known science. He was a caretaker of cosmic history, not a participant. Yet the sigil on the screen seemed to stare back at him, a silent question, waiting for an answer he did not possess. That humming in the void felt less like a relic's decay and more like the drawing of a deep, slow breath. The sleeping arrays were beginning to stir. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Eva Rostova, shifted her weight beside him. Her presence was a sharp contrast to the deck's quiet contemplation, a blade in a room full of books. Commander, long-range sensors are picking up inbound vectors. Multiple drives, high-yield signatures. They're running hot and sloppy. Looks like the gilded scrappers. Vance kept his eyes on the shimmering sigil. Their reputation precedes them. How long until they're in the system's heart? 3 hours, maybe less. They're not exactly observing efficiency protocols, Rostova said, her voice tight with disdain. They'll tear this place apart. Anything they can't melt down for rare metals, they'll sell to cultists who think these forerunners were deities. The past had a vote, and it always voted for itself. The AI's synthesized voice, calm and without inflection, cut through the low thrum of the bridge. Commander Vance, the inbound vessels match profiles for the Gilded Scrappers Flotilla Golden Horde. Their operational history indicates a 97% probability of indiscriminate destruction of historical artifacts. Their presence poses a direct threat to the primary mission objective. Thank you, Nomad, Vance murmured, rubbing his temples. The logical core was correct, of course. The scrappers were butchers, not archaeologists. They would smash priceless relics for a few grams of exotic matter. But the Pathfinder was a survey corvette armed with defensive point lasers and a single spinal mass driver meant more for clearing asteroids than engaging in fleet actions. It was a scalpel, and the scrappers were a sledgehammer. Ensign Ben Carter, the communications officer, swiveled in his chair, his face pale. Sir, we also have a second set of inbound signatures much farther out. They're clean organized. Mandate signatures, Commander. A full battle group. Vance's jaw tightened. The mandate. The monolithic bureaucracy that governed interstellar human space with an iron fist of regulations and protocols. They were the ultimate legalists, a force that prized order above all else, even discovery. They feared anomalies, and the sigil at the heart of the anchorage was the greatest anomaly humanity had yet encountered. Their arrival meant this delicate situation was about to become a jurisdictional nightmare. They would quarantine the system, classify everything, and bury the discovery under a mountain of administrative parchment. "They're using the scrappers as a pretext," Rostova growled. "They've wanted to lock down the anchorage for years. Now they have an excuse to claim the system is unstable and requires their stabilizing presence." A vast and silent engine was preparing to judge them all. Vance looked from the approaching vectors of the scrappers to the distant orderly march of the mandate fleet. In the middle, at the system's gravitational and narrative center, was the sigil. It pulsed a soft golden light that seemed to warm the cold void. It was not just a signal. It was an invitation, or a summons. He was caught between looters who would destroy the past and legalists who would entomb it. His ship was outgunned, his authority was negligible, and a mystery billions of years old was waking up on his watch. Nomad Vance said, his voice steady despite the storm gathering around them. "Project a course to the signal's origin. Maximum stealth, minimum energy profile. Take us through the Silent Shroud Nebula. We need to get there before anyone else." Rostova's head snapped toward him. "Commander, that's directly into the highest density debris field. Our navigational sensors will be half blind." "But their sensors will be fully blind," Vance countered. "The scrappers are loud. The mandate is arrogant. Neither will expect a scientific vessel to take such a risk. We are going to see what's calling to us." The AI's voice was immediate. "Calculating route. Probability of catastrophic hull breach during transit is 12.4%. Probability of detection by gilded scrappers is 3.1%. The risk is substantial, but the tactical logic is sound. Humanity was always at its best when it listened to its ghosts." As the Pathfinder slipped into the swirling dust and ice of the nebula, the bridge became a cathedral of whispers. The hum of the ship's engines was dampened by the stealth protocols. The crew moved with quiet purpose, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of their consoles. Outside, continent-sized fragments of the ancient ring world drifted past their dead surfaces, scarred by cosmic impacts and the ravages of time. It was like navigating through the bones of a fallen giant. A civilian freighter captain, hauling processed ores 10 systems away, noticed a flicker in his long-range comms array. He saw a brief coded burst from the Obsidian anchorage system, a mandate jurisdictional claim citing imminent pirate activity. He sighed, adjusting his course to add another week to his journey. The mandate's quarantines were absolute, strangling trade and exploration in the name of a sterile, predictable peace. He wondered what they were so afraid of this time. Back on the Pathfinder, Ensign Carter's hands flew across his console. "The resonance is getting stronger, Commander. It's resolving." "Nomad. Can you interpret this?" "The signal is not a language in the conventional sense," the AI replied. Its holographic avatar, a simple pillar of light, shimmered near Vance's command chair. "It is a complex set of axiomatic statements. It is broadcasting the foundational principles of a legal code." Vance leaned forward, his scholarly instincts overpowering his military caution. "Legal code. What kind of principles?" "It defines concepts of standing, of evidence, of jurisdiction. It posits a universe governed by causality and consequence, where actions create debts and credits on a universal ledger. It is a framework for cosmic jurisprudence." Nomad paused, a programmed hesitation to denote a conceptual leap. "Commander, it is not merely broadcasting a code. It is asking a question." Rostova scoffed. "What question? Who's there?" "It's a proximity alarm." No, Vance said, his eyes fixed on the sigil now dominating the forward view screen. They were getting closer. "It's more fundamental than that." "What is the question, Nomad?" A new law was about to be written in the language of light. "It is asking," the AI stated, its synthesized voice holding a new, almost imperceptible note of something like awe. Who is worthy to render judgment? The Pathfinder broke through the last veil of nebula dust, and the sight before them stole the breath of every person on the bridge. It was a ship. Or more accurately, it was what a ship might dream of becoming. It was a single vast obsidian structure, easily 10 kilometers long, shaped like a balanced scale. The sigil they had seen on sensors was carved into its hull, a glowing golden tracery that pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm. The ship was ancient, its hull pitted and scarred by eons of drifting, yet it emanated a palpable sense of power, a stillness that was not the absence of energy, but the perfect containment of it. It was not a warship. It was a courthouse. Sensors pinged. "Commander, the scrappers have detected us," Carter yelled. "They've changed course. They're coming right for us, 5 ships closing fast. They must think we know something they don't." Rostova said, her hands moving to the tactical display. "They want whatever prize we've found. Shields are up. Point defenses are online. I don't recommend engaging with the spinal driver. The energy release would be like a dinner bell for the Mandate." Vance ignored the approaching threat for a crucial second, his gaze locked on the ancient vessel. The Reckoner, he thought the name materializing in his mind with unbidden certainty. It was waiting. It had asked its question. The scrappers were about to give their answer, with plasma cannons and mass drivers. He had to give his first. There are answers only honesty can provide. Rostova evasive maneuvers. Keep the scrappers busy, but do not fire back. Carter open a wideband channel to that vessel. All frequencies. Transmit our entire mission log, unencrypted. The bridge went silent, save for the hum of the consoles. Rostova turned to him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Commander, our mission log. That includes our operational weaknesses. Our crew manifests our energy reserves. It's everything." "Yes, it is," Vance said calmly. "It's who we are. It's our charter from the Explorer Corps, our mandate to observe our rules of engagement that prioritize preservation over conflict. It is the proof of our intent. We are not looters. We are not conquerors. We are scholars and guardians. Let our actions speak for us." "Sir, the scrappers are firing!" Carter shouted as the Pathfinder shuddered. A proximity alert blared. On the tactical display, 5 angry red icons swarmed their small blue signature. Plasma bolts, brilliant and destructive, tore through the void around them. The Pathfinder's shields flared, absorbing the impacts, but the strain was already showing. The scrappers were brutal and efficient, a pack of hyenas tearing at a lone gazelle. "Transmit the log." Ensign Vance commanded, his voice never rising. "Now." Carter's fingers trembled slightly as he complied. A stream of data, the entire history and legal standing of the Corvette Pathfinder, flowed out into the void, directed at the silent, waiting monolith. It was a declaration not of strength, but of principle. An appeal to a higher court. The universe does not care for intentions, only for actions. The Gilded Scrappers' leader, a grizzled pirate named Kalen, laughed from the bridge of his flagship, the Gilded Maw. "Look at them squirming. What's that they're transmitting? Their service record. Are they trying to bore us to death?" His crew cackled along with him. They were closing in for the kill, their forward cannons charging for a crippling blow. Their answer to the question of worthiness was simple. They were worthy because they had the bigger guns. They took what they wanted. That was their law. The Pathfinder bucked again, harder this time. "Shields at 60%, Rostova called out. "Hull integrity failing on deck 7. "We can't take much more of this, Commander." Vance stood his ground, his knuckles white where he gripped the command chair's armrest. He watched the obsidian ship, praying to a god he didn't believe in, that his gamble would pay off. He had shown his hand. He had presented his case. And then the universe answered. The golden sigil on the Reckoner flared its light, expanding from a soft glow to a brilliant system-spanning radiance. A low, resonant tone echoed not through the air, but through the minds of everyone in the system. It was a sound of immense weight, of a scale tipping of an account being opened. A new law had just been entered into the cosmic record. The awakening was complete. The Reckoner did not fire a single weapon. No lasers, no missiles, no kinetics. Instead, it projected a field, an invisible, intangible domain of absolute causality that enveloped the entire debris field. Within this domain, there was no room for interpretation. There was only the letter of the law it had broadcast. There was only the ledger. A debt is a promise the universe intends to keep. On the bridge of the Gilded Maw, Kalen watched his tactical display turn to chaos. The plasma bolt he had just fired at the Pathfinder suddenly ceased to exist. It hadn't been blocked or redirected. It had been unmade. A line of text appeared on his screen, stark and simple, written in the base code of his ship's own computer. "What is this?" Kalen roared. "Some kind of ECM trick. Find the source and burn it." His weapons officer tried to comply, but his console was dead. "Sir, I've lost firing control. All weapon systems are offline." Panic began to spread across the Scrapper Bridge. Another line of text appeared on every screen. The lights on the Gilded Maw flickered. The ship's powerful engines began to sputter. The pirate captain felt a cold dread creep up his spine. This was not a weapon. This was an audit. The mirror shows you only what you are. The same message was appearing on all 5 Scrapper ships. They had all been judged in an instant. Their histories of piracy, theft, and murder were being tallied not by a court, but by the fundamental laws of physics now governed by the ancient ship's domain. Their stolen fuel, their pirated engine components, their illegally modified weapons, every shortcut, every crime was being called to account. The Reckoner did nothing more. It simply held the domain. It held the mirror up to the Scrappers, and their own actions became their executioner. The fusion core of the Gilded Maw, denied its stolen fuel source by a power that could rewrite causality, began to collapse. The ship's own energy turned against it. Containment fields failed, power conduits overloaded, and the hull groaned under the strain of its own internal rebellion. Kalen watched in horror as his ship tore itself apart from the inside. It was not an attack. It was a repossession. A foreclosure on a debt of violence. One by one, the 5 Scrapper ships were consumed by their own unlawful energy. They erupted in silent, brilliant flashes of light, their destruction a perfect and terrible equation. Action and consequence delivered with the cold, impartial precision of a mathematician. The bridge of the Pathfinder was utterly silent. The crew stared stunned at the empty space where the Scrapper fleet had been moments before. The red icons were gone. The threat was gone. Rostova slowly lowered her hands from the tactical console, her face a mask of disbelief. What just happened?" Carter whispered. Vance let out a slow, shaky breath. "It didn't attack them," he said. His voice filled with a profound and terrifying understanding. It audited them. It held them to their own account. A voice ancient and resonant spoke in his mind. It was not a voice of words, but of pure concept, of undeniable truth. He had passed the test. He had answered the question of worthiness not with power, but with principle. And in doing so, he had been deputized by a force older than his species. A new alert blared, pulling them all from their shock. It was Ensign Carter, his voice now sharp with a new kind of fear. "Commander, the Mandate Battle Group has just entered the system. They're powering weapons. They've hailed us. They're demanding we surrender the anomaly to their authority. Immediately." On the main view screen, the symbol of the Mandate fleet, appeared a clenched iron fist. Behind it, the vast, silent form of the Reckoner waited, its golden sigil pulsing like a steady heartbeat. Vance was no longer just a scholar. He was the executor of a will written at the dawn of time, and the bill collectors had just arrived. His ship was damaged. His crew was in shock. And his new ally was a cosmic judge whose ways were terrifyingly alien. The law is only as strong as those who uphold it. Admiral Corin Thrace of the Mandate flagship. Immutable will stared at the tactical display. The energy signatures from the scrapper's destruction were unlike anything he had ever seen. They were clean, efficient, and utterly terrifying. The anomaly, the ancient ship had demonstrated a power that could destabilize entire sectors. It could not be allowed to exist outside of their control. The fact that a lowly survey corvette was in communion with it was an intolerable breach of protocol. Commodore Jan Thrace said to his second-in-command, his voice clipped and cold, "Inform the Pathfinder that they have 5 minutes to power down their systems and prepare to be boarded. Inform them that their failure to comply will be interpreted as an act of collusion with a hostile, unregulated entity. And the anomaly, Admiral, if it interferes," Thrace said, his eyes narrowing, "we will teach it the Mandate's definition of order." On the Pathfinder, Vance heard the ultimatum. He looked at the tired, frightened faces of his crew. He looked at the hulking forms of the Mandate warships bristling with weapons that could atomize his small vessel in seconds. Then he looked at the silent, patient form of the Reckoner. It had judged the scrappers. Now it seemed it was waiting for him to judge the Mandate. Nomad Vance said, his voice quiet but clear, "What is the operational status of the Reckoner?" "The entity has established a stable domain of jurisprudential oversight," the AI replied. "It appears to be in a state of observation. It is waiting for your plea. A plea. A legal term. Not a command. Not a request for fire support." Vance had to argue his case. He was not a commander in a battle. He was a lawyer in a courtroom, and his client was a power that could rewrite reality. Rostova stepped forward. "Commander, we can't fight them. They'll crush us. We won't fight them with weapons." Eva Vance said, a strange sense of clarity settling over him. He felt the weight of his office, the true meaning of his commission as an officer of the Explorer Corps. He was a representative of humanity's curiosity, its respect for the past, its commitment to something greater than mere power. "We will fight them with the law." He turned to the communications console. "Ensign Carter, open a channel to the Mandate flagship. All frequencies. Visual requested." "Aye, Commander." Admiral Thrace's face appeared on the screen. He was a man carved from granite, his expression one of absolute, unyielding authority. "Commander Vance, I trust you are preparing to comply." Admiral Thrace Vance began, his voice ringing with a newfound confidence that surprised even himself. "Under the authority of the Explorer Corps, Charter Section 4, Paragraph 2, I have identified a sentient, pre-human artifact of immense historical and cultural significance. I am formally declaring this system a protected heritage site. Your fleet is in violation of that protection. I must ask you to stand down. There is no greater weapon than a law applied fairly." Thrace's expression flickered from arrogance to incredulous rage. "A heritage site, Commander. You are in command of a single damaged corvette. I am in command of a battle group. Your authority is irrelevant. You are harboring a dangerous weapon. Stand down or be removed." "It is not a weapon," Admiral Vance said. "It is a teacher. It is a historian. It teaches by numbers, and it remembers by ledgers. It has never and will never use a collar." This was the lore stamp, the fragment of data he'd gleaned from the initial conceptual contact. It was the core of the relic's philosophy. A system of accountability, not a system of control. Thrace was unmoved. "Your sentiment is noted and dismissed. You have 1 minute, Commander." The transmission cut. The countdown began on the Pathfinder's tactical display. 60 seconds until their world ended. Rostova looked at Vance, her earlier disbelief replaced by a grim loyalty. Carter's hands were steady on his console. They were with him to the end. Nomad Vance said, turning to the pillar of light that was his AI. It's time to make our plea. Inform the reckoner of the situation. Transmit the mandate's ultimatum. Transmit their fleet composition, their order of battle. But also transmit their legal charter, the very documents that give them their authority. I do not understand the logic, Commander Nomad stated. Presenting our opponent's legal justification seems counterintuitive to our survival. The scrappers were judged by their actions because they had no law. Vance explained the pieces clicking into place in his mind. The mandate is defined by its law. Let them be judged by it. We are not asking for a weapon. We are asking for a mirror. The highest laws are those we write for ourselves. As the final seconds ticked away, a new stream of data flowed from the Pathfinder to the ancient ship. It was the mandate's own legal code, a vast and complex document filled with regulations, protocols, and proclamations of its own supreme authority in the name of peace and order. On the bridge of the immutable will, Admiral Thrace gave the order. Target the corvette's engines. Disable it. The mandate warship's main batteries locked on. Energy levels surged. But before they could fire, the golden light from the reckoner pulsed once more wider and more intense than before. The domain of causality expanded, enveloping the entire mandate fleet. Again, text appeared on the mandate bridges, but this time it quoted their own laws back at them. Thrace stared at the words, his face pale. It was quoting his own rulebook. Another message appeared. The mandate's greatest weapon had always been its unshakable belief in its own legal and moral righteousness. Now that weapon was being turned against it. The ancient ship was not attacking them. It was prosecuting them using their own laws as the basis for the indictment. A choice is a debt you owe to the future. A low hum began to fill the bridge of the immutable will. It was the sound of the ship's own power core beginning to fluctuate. The ship wasn't being drained by an external force. Its own systems, now held accountable to the promises of its charter, were refusing to power an illegal act. The more Thrace tried to force the command to fire, the more his ship's energy systems rebelled. The engines began to cool. The weapon capacitors began to discharge harmlessly into space. He was being mirrored. His own logic, his own law was being reflected back at him, enforced by a power that treated jurisprudence as a fundamental force of the universe. He could not fight it. To fight it would be to argue with the very foundation of his own authority. He was trapped in a cage of his own making. On the Pathfinder, they watched as the entire Mandate battle group simply stopped. Their weapon ports closed. Their engine signatures cooled to idle. They were not damaged. They were neutered, rendered impotent by their own hypocrisy. Vance felt a wave of exhaustion and relief wash over him. He had faced down 2 fleets and won without firing a shot. He had placed his faith in the law, and the universe had answered. A final private concept entered his mind from the Reckoner. It was not a thank you. It was not a congratulations. It was a statement of fact, a new entry in the great cosmic book. Vance looked out at the silent, humbled Mandate fleet and the vast watching presence of his new charge. The first battle was over. The fight for the soul of humanity, for the choice between control and justice, had just begun. He was no longer just a commander or a scholar. He was a steward, an executor, an agent of a law so old it remembered the birth of stars. And the ledger was far from closed. He now understood that his small ship was not just a vessel of discovery, but the first entry in a new chapter of cosmic law. The Pathfinder had lived up to its name, and the path ahead was long. The universe bends toward justice, but it requires a fulcrum. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. The Mandate fleet hung in the void, their systems held in a state of enforced compliance. Admiral Thrace, a man whose will had shaped entire sectors, was now a prisoner of his own legal code. He had not been defeated by force of arms, but by the force of his own arguments. It was a humiliation more profound than any military loss. Vance knew this victory was not an ending, but a new and far more complex beginning. He had the mandate's attention, and their fury would be cold, patient, and bureaucratic. They would search for a loophole, a clause, a way to legally strangle this new, inconvenient truth. Rostova's voice was low, a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Commander, what are your orders?" All eyes on the bridge were on him. They looked at him differently now. He had gambled with their lives on a principle, and the universe had paid out. He was no longer just their CO. He was the man who had spoken to a god and been answered. "First, let's assess our own house," Vance said, his voice regaining its familiar, steady tone. "Damage reports. Get engineering to give me a timeline on engine and shield repairs. Carter, maintain a passive scan on the Mandate fleet. Inform me of any change in their status, no matter how small. Nomad, I want you to interface with the Reckoner, as much as it will allow. We need to understand the full scope of its domain, its capabilities, its limits." "Affirmative, Commander," the AI responded. "However, initial analysis suggests the concept of limits may not be applicable in the traditional sense. The entity does not appear to use energy in a quantifiable way. It manipulates causality itself. Its limit may be the logical consistency of the universe." A chilling thought. What happens when you argue with reality? A small civilian transport belonging to a sect of historical purists known as the Cogitors dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. They had followed whispers of a great awakening. Their lead archivist, an elderly woman named Alara, watched her sensors with rapt attention. She saw the powerful Mandate fleet sitting idle, the small Explorer Corps vessel standing before it, like a shepherd, and the colossal, dark form of the ancient ship. The energy readings were quiet, but the system resonated with something else, a palpable sense of order. "It is as the prophecies foretold," she whispered to her followers. "The great adjudicator has returned. The age of unwritten laws is over." Their arrival marked the third faction, a group that would see the Reckoner not as a weapon or a tool, but as a divinity. The conflict was escalating, drawing in new players with new dangerous agendas. Vance felt the shift immediately. The arrival of the Cogitor vessel was a new complication. He now had looters, legalists, and now potentially fanatics to deal with. The Obsidian anchorage was no longer a forgotten graveyard. It was becoming the most important place in the galaxy. Commander Carter reported, his voice tight. "The Cogitor ship is hailing us. They are requesting permission to approach the Holy Arbiter and receive its judgment." "Deny them politely," Vance ordered. "Tell them the situation is unstable and to maintain their distance for their own safety." He could not allow this to become a pilgrimage site. The power of the Reckoner was a scalpel to be used with precision. In the hands of zealots, it would become a guillotine. He needed a plan. He was a steward, but a steward of what? An ancient courthouse. A living legal document. He had to define the precedent he had just set before others defined it for him. He needed to establish a doctrine. The Reckoner had taught by numbers and remembered by ledgers, never by collars. It was a system of accountability, not control. This was the core principle. The Mandate sought to put a collar on everything it couldn't understand. The Scrappers acknowledged no law but their own greed. The Cogitors wanted to worship the law, to surrender their will to it. All were wrong. All were imbalances. A law unquestioned becomes a cage. Nomad. "Let's test a theory," Vance said, turning to the AI. The Reckoner audited the Scrappers based on their actions, theft, violence. It judged the Mandate based on its own internal legal code. There is a pattern here. It judges a party by the standards they themselves establish. "That is a logically consistent hypothesis," Commander Nomad replied. "It would explain the differing responses." The scrappers who lived by the law of force were undone by a force they could not match. The mandate who live by the law of procedure were undone by their own procedures. Exactly, Vance affirmed. So what happens if a party has no laws? What happens to the innocent, the civilian freighter captain just trying to make a living or a colony on the edge of space? This was the heart of the matter. Was this power only a tool for punishing the guilty, or could it also protect the innocent? This was the first question he would ask in his new role as steward. He needed to establish a legal framework for interaction, a set of rules that were just transparent and defensible. Not just for him, but for all of humanity. He turned to his crew. We have a new mission. It's no longer just to explore and record. It is to interpret and, if necessary, to argue. We are the bridge between humanity and this ancient authority. Our responsibility is to ensure it remains a tool of justice, not a weapon of oppression. Rostova met his gaze, a slow smile spreading across her face. A much better mission than cataloging dust, Commander. But before he could begin to draft his new doctrine, a new alert flashed on the main screen. It wasn't another ship. It was a message from deep within Mandate territory, routed through encrypted military channels. It was from an anonymous source. The message was simple and terrifying. It was a single file, a top-secret Mandate contingency plan, codenamed Scythe of Order. It detailed a protocol for neutralizing reality-altering phenomena. It did not involve ships or weapons. It involved using a targeted gravitational anomaly to create a localized black hole, effectively erasing the target from space-time. It was the Mandate's ultimate solution to things it could not control, absolute, irreversible deletion. The anonymous message ended with a single line of text. They will not accept the precedent. They will unmake the board. You have 2 cycles. Vance stared at the message, the blood draining from his face. The second escalation had arrived. He had won the legal battle, but the Mandate was preparing to burn down the courthouse with the judge, the jury, and the witness still inside. His gambit with the law had worked, but now he was facing an enemy willing to break the ultimate law, the laws of physics themselves. And he had less than 48 hours to stop them. When the law fails, only truth remains. Vance stared at the message, the words, Scythe of Order, burning a cold trail across his mind. This was the Mandate's true face, the one hidden beneath layers of procedure and legal justification. When faced with a power that could hold them accountable, their solution was not to adapt or learn. It was to tear the page from the book, to burn the courthouse to the ground. Annihilation was their final, perfect form of order. He felt the deck plates of the Pathfinder beneath his boots, a fragile shell of civilization in a sea of calculated entropy. His ship was wounded, his crew exhausted, and his new ally was a silent, unknowable intelligence. He was out of time and out of options. Rostova read the intercept over his shoulder, her breath catching in her throat. A localized black hole. That's not just disproportionate force. That's insane. They would wipe out the entire system, destroy the Reckoner, their own fleet, everything just to remove an anomaly from their star charts. It's the ultimate bureaucratic solution, Vance said, his voice grim. If a problem doesn't fit into the existing framework, you don't change the framework. You eliminate the problem. No messy reports, no public hearings, no inconvenient precedents. The universe had many voices, but the Void's was the loudest. Nomad's holographic pillar shimmered. Commander, the threat is credible. The Mandate's Scythe of Order is a theoretical weapon system hypothesized by our intelligence archives. It does not use a projectile. It uses a network of synchronized gravity projectors, likely disguised as standard hyperspace beacons to fold space-time at a single coordinate. The energy required would be astronomical. The result would be a clean, instantaneous, and irreversible event. How do we fight that? Carter asked, his voice barely a whisper. We can't shoot space-time. We can't put up a shield against a black hole. Vance's mind raced. He could not run. The mandate's reach was long and they would hunt him down for what he knew. He could not surrender, for that would mean consigning the Reckoner to oblivion. He had only one path forward: to lean into the power he now served. He had to use the law against an enemy that was preparing to break the highest law of all. "We don't fight it with guns," Vance declared, a plan beginning to form, stark and terrifying in its simplicity. "We fight it with jurisprudence." The Reckoner judged the scrappers by their actions, and the Mandate fleet by their own rules. We must now present a case against this ultimate crime. We will charge the Mandate High Command with the attempted murder of a star system. A bold claim is a debt that truth must pay. Rostova stared at him. "A case, Commander. This isn't a courtroom. They are coming to kill us." "Here it is always a courtroom," Vance countered, gesturing to the silent obsidian ship that dominated the view screen. "That is the precedent we have established. But a court needs evidence. The anonymous tip is not enough. We need proof. We need to detect the scythe of order as it's being deployed. Nomad, can you recalibrate our long-range sensors? Forget ships. Look for gravity distortions, for synchronized energy patterns emanating from Mandate beacons in the surrounding sectors. Retasking sensors now," the AI confirmed. "I will have to create new analytical models. The background noise in this debris field will make it difficult. I will need to interface with the Reckoner's domain to use its stability as a baseline against which to measure a forming anomaly." A family on a Mandate colony world. Kalen's Reach gathered for their evening meal. A state-sanctioned news report played softly on a nearby screen, describing a minor pirate action in the remote Obsidian anchorage. The announcer spoke of the Mandate's swift and decisive action to pacify the region and secure a dangerous, unregulated artifact. The father nodded in approval, reassured that the Mandate was keeping the galaxy safe and orderly. He had no idea that the stable hyperspace lanes his livelihood depended upon were being repurposed into a weapon that would unmake creation. Vance watched his crew work. Rostova was coordinating with engineering, pushing the damaged systems of the Pathfinder to their absolute limits. Carter was monitoring the sullen, silent Mandate fleet and the newly arrived Cogitor vessel. The fanatics had not moved, but they were broadcasting a continuous chant, a litany of praise for the great adjudicator. They were another variable, another potential spark in a room filled with plasma conduits. A law without compassion is merely an equation for pain. Vance opened a channel to Admiral Thrace's flagship. It took a moment for the Admiral to accept. When his face appeared, it was etched with a profound, simmering fury. He was a caged predator, and Vance was his keeper. "What do you want?" Commander Thrace's voice was a low growl. "I want to ask you a question," Admiral Vance said, his tone even respectful. "The Mandate's highest law, the one that underpins your entire charter, is the preservation of order and the sanctity of sentient life. I want to know if you believe that erasing an entire star system, including your own fleet, serves that law." Thrace's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Vance had struck a nerve. The Admiral was a zealot for the Mandate's code, but he was also an honorable officer, a man who believed in the principles he enforced. The idea of such a self-destructive nihilistic act clearly sat poorly with him. "I am a soldier of the Mandate." Thrace said, his voice tight. "I follow the orders of my superiors. I do not question high command." "But you know this is wrong, don't you?" Vance pressed gently. "This isn't order. This is annihilation. This isn't peacekeeping. It's a cover-up. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that I offered you a choice. There is a higher law at work here now, Admiral. A law that holds everyone accountable." He cut the connection, leaving Thrace to wrestle with his conscience. He had planted a seed of doubt. It probably wouldn't be enough, but it was a start. The first crack in the iron wall of Mandate ideology. A conscience is the ghost of a choice not yet made. Hours bled into one another. The bridge of the Pathfinder was a tense bubble of focused activity. Coffee bulbs were drained and discarded. Status reports flowed in a constant, quiet stream. The ship's systems were strained, its power core running hot to feed the enhanced sensor sweeps. Every crew member felt the immense pressure of the ticking clock. They were hunting for the footsteps of a god-killer. Then Nomad spoke, its synthesized voice cutting through the tension like glass. "Commander, I have found it. A coordinated, phased gravitational lensing effect. It is emanating from a network of 112 modified hyperspace beacons, all focusing on a single point just outside the anchorage. The energy buildup is following a geometric progression. The Scythe of Order is active and charging. Time to event horizon formation is approximately 18 hours. The tactical map updated. A web of faint lines appeared, a spider's web of gravitational energy, its center aimed directly at them. The sheer scale of it was breathtaking. This was not a weapon being fired. This was the fundamental architecture of interstellar travel being weaponized. It was an act of cosmic perversion. At the same time, the Cogiter vessel began to move. "Commander, they're breaking their station!" Carter called out. "They're accelerating toward us, hailing on all channels. They're saying, 'The trial is upon us. We must be at the heart of the judgment to prove our faith.'" "They'll fly right into the convergence point," Rostova said, her face grim. "They're going to get themselves killed and complicate the entire tactical situation." The faithful often make the poorest witnesses. Vance had to act. He could not let them commit suicide by zealotry. He opened a channel not to argue, but to command. His voice took on a resonance it had never held before, a weight that came from standing next to a power like the Reckoner. "This is Commander Vance of the stewardship vessel Pathfinder." He broadcast, his voice carrying the authority of his new station. "You will halt your approach immediately. The Arbiter is not conducting a trial of faith. It is preparing a legal proceeding. Your role in this is not to be a sacrifice. It is to be a witness. Your testimony is required. You will reposition to the designated coordinates I am transmitting, and you will record everything you see. That is the service the Arbiter demands of you." He had framed his command in their own language. He gave their faith a purpose, a function within the legal framework he was building. To his immense relief, the Cogitor vessel slowed and began to alter its course. They had accepted their role as official observers for the court. One crisis was averted. The larger one remained. 18 hours, Vance said softly, looking at the ominous web on his screen. "It's time to make our plea." He gathered his thoughts, marshaling his arguments like a lawyer preparing for his final summation. This was for everything. The lives of his crew, the survival of the Mandate fleet, the continued existence of an entity that held the promise of a more just universe. "Nomad." He began, his voice ringing with purpose on the silent bridge. "Transmit the following to the Reckoner. Use the full scope of our data, our sensor logs, our analysis of the Scythe of Order. This is our formal petition." He took a deep breath. To the entity known as the Reckoner, he spoke as if dictating a sacred text. "We, the crew of the Explorer Corps vessel Pathfinder, acting as stewards of this domain, bring before you a case of ultimate transgression. The governing body known as the Mandate, a signatory to its own laws of order and preservation, is now engaged in an act that violates the very fabric of cosmic law. They seek to unmake a portion of space-time, to destroy all records, all history, all matter within this system. They do this not to preserve order, but to hide from a truth they find inconvenient. A deed is not measured by its intent, but by its echo. This act, the Scythe of Order, is the ultimate expression of unlawful force. It is an attempt to silence a court, to murder a witness, and to burn the ledger. It is a crime against causality itself. We do not ask you to answer with violence. We do not ask you to destroy in their name. We ask you to do what you have done before. We ask you to hold up the mirror. We ask you to present them with the bill for their actions." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Let them be judged not by our laws or even by yours, but by their own. Their charter is to preserve the integrity of the universe. We ask you to hold them to that standard. We ask for a full and final audit of the mandate's actions here today. The ledger is open. We submit this as our plea." The transmission was sent. A torrent of data of evidence of legal argument flowed from the small corvette to the silent obsidian giant. For a long, agonizing minute, nothing happened. The web of gravitational energy on the tactical map continued to brighten. The clock continued to tick down. Carter looked at the sensor readings, his face ashen. "Commander, the energy curve is spiking. They're entering the final phase. We have minutes, maybe less." The Pathfinder shuddered, a groaning protest from its strained inertial dampeners as the first waves of space-time distortion washed over them. Outside, the swirling dust of the nebula began to behave strangely, drawn toward an invisible point in space. The show was starting, and then the Reckoner answered. The golden sigil on its hull did not just glow. It ignited. A sun of pure liquid gold light erupted from the ancient ship, a light that was not hot, but carried with it a profound sense of clarity and truth. The domain of causality it projected expanded exponentially, not just to envelop the ships in the anchorage, but to encompass the entire network of mandate beacons across a dozen star systems. It was a net of law cast across the stars. A ledger once opened must be balanced. The scythe of order was not blocked. It was not deflected. The Reckoner simply accepted it. The immense reality-bending gravitational energy that was meant to crush the system into a singularity was instead rerouted. It flowed into the domain not as a weapon, but as a transaction. On the bridge of the Pathfinder, and on every ship in the system, a single system-wide message appeared, broadcast by an unimaginable power. It was an invoice. The mandate's weapon was not a weapon anymore. It was a debt of impossible magnitude, and the time for payment was now. Across the galaxy, 112 mandate hyperspace beacons suddenly went dark, but they did not just power down. Their fusion cores, their structural supports, their very atoms were unmade, their energy and mass converted and balanced against the cosmic debt they had incurred. The web of gravitational energy vanished as if it had never been. The scythe of order had been turned back on its creators not by reflecting its power, but by foreclosing on the loan they had taken out against reality. The mandate's precious interstellar highway, the very source of its power and control, was shattered. In a single, silent, elegant moment, the Reckoner had not just saved the obsidian anchorage. It had crippled the mandate's ability to project overwhelming force across that entire sector of space. The mirror had been held up, and the mandate had been forced to pay for its own reflection. A silence filled the void, the sound of a debt paid in full. On the bridge of the Pathfinder, the crew watched their tactical map as dozens of friendly green icons representing the beacons winked out of existence. The system was safe. The silence that followed was more profound than any explosion. Vance felt the cost of the victory in his own bones. The golden light from the Reckoner faded, its sigil now a dim, tired bronze. It looked exhausted. A subtle tremor ran through his own ship, a sympathetic vibration from the immense causal forces that had just been manipulated. The lights on the bridge flickered once, twice, then stabilized. The cost was real. He had pushed his ship, his crew, and his silent partner to the very edge. A deep psychic exhaustion settled over him, the feeling of having stared into the heart of the universal machine. Admiral Thrace, on the bridge of the immutable will, watched his connection to high command dissolve into static. His fleet was now an island adrift in a sea of stars with no easy way home. His superiors had overplayed their hand, and now their most powerful piece had been taken from the board. His ship had been spared, but his ideology was in ruins. He looked at the small corvette on his screen, no longer a nuisance, but the agent of a power that had fundamentally changed the galaxy. His personal terminal blinked. It was a message from Vance. "The account is settled, Admiral. Your fleet is free to leave. Tell your superiors what happened here. Tell them there is a new law in this sector. A law of accountability." Vance stood up, his legs unsteady, but his resolve firm. He had done it. He had faced down the ultimate expression of control and met it with the ultimate expression of justice. He addressed his crew, his voice filled with a quiet pride that resonated deeper than any battle honor. "We came here as scholars. We leave here as guardians. We have a new duty: to ensure that this power, this precedent, is never used as a weapon of fear, but always as a tool of justice. This is the Anchorage precedent." Months passed. The Obsidian Anchorage, now a declared neutral territory under the stewardship of the Pathfinder, had become a beacon. Not for zealots or conquerors, but for diplomats and scholars, for independent worlds tired of the mandate's heavy hand and the chaos of piracy. It was a place where disputes could be settled, where treaties could be forged under the watchful gaze of a power that ensured all parties acted in good faith, lest their own words be turned against them. Vance stood on his bridge watching a small diplomatic vessel from the Commonwealth of Aligned Worlds approach. They had a dispute with a powerful mining guild, a disagreement that would have once led to a trade war or armed conflict. Now they were coming here to the court of the Reckoner for arbitration. On a side console, a new ledger entry blinked to life. Nomad had created a formal docket, a way to organize the new reality of their mission. The screen showed the case title, the parties involved, and a single glowing line at the bottom. The golden sigil on the Reckoner, now fully restored to its gentle, pulsing glow, brightened for a moment, as if acknowledging the new case. Its arrays, once sleeping, were now active, though cool, ready for the quiet, meticulous work of cosmic justice. He had thought that the great struggle of humanity was for survival, for dominance against a hostile universe. But he now knew the truth. The greatest power was not in a weapon that could unmake stars, but in a simple, honest accounting. The universe was not chaotic or indifferent. It was a grand and beautiful legal system, and for the first time, humanity was learning how to argue its case before the ultimate judge. The age of empires was over,